Okay, I'm gonna introduce. Hi, everybody. We're at the Mood Disorder Support and Education Group here in North Carolina, and I'm Cindy Jones. I'm a therapist that has been running this group for a while. But tonight we have a favorite colleague of mine, Paula Atkinson, speaking on body, social justice, and many, many things. And I have known Paula for a few years and learned so much about just opening freedoms about my internalized body stigma and passing that on to my clients and just continuing that freedom move. So really grateful to have you here. I'm going to pop off and let you tell us all about it, Paula.
Great. Well, thanks, Cindy. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm so grateful for your support. You're so supportive of me. I feel very lucky. So yeah, my name is Paula Atkinson. I am a psychotherapist and yoga teacher and energy healer and all of these things. And where I focus mostly when I see clients in the psychotherapy realm is on body justice and body liberation. And Lindsay, you said body neutrality. Exactly. And I kind of use those words a little interchangeably, but if people have questions on specifically what those things mean, we can get into it. And so the way I do that is by bringing that into the room with clients. So that when a client comes to me with quote unquote body image issues, yes, you have body image issues. How I would frame it is you have internalized anti-fat bias because you grew up in this culture, right? You were brainwashed to believe that a smaller body is superior to a larger body. And we have lots of ways that we talk about that in terms of health, in terms of attractiveness, in terms of all of these things. But the truth is that it's just that people who live in big bodies are oppressed, that there's systematic bias, specifically in the healthcare field and specifically in the mental health care field. And that for somebody to have quote unquote body image issues is really just a reflection of what they've been taught around good bodies and bad bodies and how bodies need to be small in order to be valuable, in order to be okay, in order to be worthy of existing. So I bring that into the room and I work with people when it comes to eating disorders, disordered eating, body hatred, exercise compulsion. And we work on extricating that first, because it's sort of where we have to start. It's somewhat impossible to heal, quote unquote, from disordered eating or exercise compulsion or any sorts of things without knowing that that's happening and without knowing that there's an onslaught every single moment of your waking life going on to try to brainwash you to believe that you would be a more valuable person if your body is smaller. So how can I work with people with disordered eating without that, without knowing that every single person is getting that message on a daily basis? And so that's where we start. I'm working towards body liberation. But my definition of body liberation is that all bodies that exist in this moment are valuable as they exist in this moment. No body has to change shape in order to be more valuable than it is in this moment. That's impossible. It's absolutely impossible for a body to be more valuable just by changing its shape. That's where we start with clients, and then we sort of go from there. When I start out with the client, I talk a lot about, like, did you grow up in a fat phobic home? Were you brainwashed by, did your parents believe that small bodies were superior to large bodies? How did that manifest? Was your mom on a diet, right? All of these things. And most of us, the answer to that is yes, because this idea that small bodies are superior has been around for now over a century, probably around 2 centuries. I also teach a class called Weight and Society about body justice. And we go into the history of fat phobia, the history of dieting, and the history of the intersection of racism, white supremacy, capitalism, institutionalized poverty. All of these things are connected. So what I bring to a mood disorder group is, hopefully is what I bring to it, is wanting to talk about like feeding your body right? And we talked about this a little bit last time when I was here, was you can't be sane and starving at the same time. And so often we're not feeding our bodies well. We're trying to lose weight. We're trying to get smaller. We talked a lot last time, and I'm open to questions about meds and how sometimes a med will make your brain saner and your body bigger. And the body getting bigger is seen as a detriment. And I don't believe that, because you know, mental health and physical health are not separate things, right? And so what would it be like for your body to get bigger as you became saner, as you became more comfortable on the planet, living between your ears, and not see your body getting bigger as a problem, and that must be the way your body wants to be. And then it must be the way your body needs to be in order for you to be more sane on the planet. And how can that be wrong, right? How can that be a bad thing? So that's sort of where we talked about last time. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that. I don't know where else you hoping I would go, Cindy. It's sort of like my introduction to what I do.
I feel like there's still a pushback when I'm introducing some of your topics to my clients or my friends, which is, you know, but you need to exercise more, or you need to eat more nutritious. There's still this sense that it's not enough. Like where I am right now, or where they are right now, is not enough. And so I want to, like, how to come back at that, how to work on the new paradigm.
Yeah. So say more. When you bring something that, like, oh, all bodies that exist in this moment are perfect, and there's probably the health debate, right? Oh, but our health kind of thing. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And this is something that I can talk about a lot, and when I teach my class. So first of all, there's just the truth that you can't be, quote unquote, healthy, like your body be healthy, and you be in active loathing of your body at the same time. That is not healthy, right? Like if the version of health that you have been told that you should strive for has no room for joy, acceptance, fun with food, fun with your body, right? A sense of that you are more than your body, that the shape of your body is relevant, right? Then how can that actually be health, right? And one of my favorite teachers who I love so much, Lindy West, says, you know, she wrote this incredible book about like living in a fat body in this culture. And over and over and over, she got asked, aren't you glorifying obesity? Which is not a thing. That is not real. And she said it so beautifully: if you pretend or claim to care about fat people's health, and you are not actively trying to break down anti-fat bias, you are a liar, because the thing that's actually bad for fat people is anti-fat bias. There is nothing worse for a fat person than anti-fat bias. Now, all of the junk food in the world, all of the sedentary lifestyle is not nearly as bad for a body and a brain as being actively oppressed on a daily basis about something as irrelevant as the shape of a body. So that's my response when people say, oh, but your health, right? If you really care about fat people's health, you would join me in actively breaking down this idea that fat bodies are inferior.
I mean, I get that in concept, but then even too, as someone previously had alluded to, some of that bias is still there. So what
of course.
Exposure, what is the way to really break it down? To like pictures, like how do you break down this is ugly? How do you
right? Well, so when I talk about this, I talk a lot about like the relatively recent, over the past few decades, like active choices for white people to break down their own white supremacy, because it's the same thing, right? That like if you are actively trying to break down the white supremacist thoughts in your head, You also can be, and I would say should, even though I don't like that word, actively trying to break down the anti-fat bias in your head, because they're very, very, very much related. You can look into the person that's doing the most writing and research on this is Dr. Sabrina Strings from UC Santa Barbara or San Diego, I forget, the California state. California UC, and she talks about that. She wrote a book called Fearing the Black Body, and about how fat bias is inherently racist, because the reason why we started to think that fat bodies are bad bodies is because around the times of eugenics and around the times of race science, where mostly French men, but a lot of other white men were proving that people who lived in white bodies were superior to people who live in large bodies. What happened on the women's side specifically, and then bleeded into the men as well, was that there was this idea that Europeans should be thin and austere to differentiate themselves from the former enslaved people or the descendants of slave people in the West. So fat phobia and white supremacy are married, are deeply entrenched together. So if you're, again, like if you're working on your white supremacist viewpoints, you should be working on your anti-fat viewpoints as well. Now, how do you do that? You know, the same way you do the white supremacist work, right? You notice that that's a thought. Oh, that's interesting, right? Like, of course you have deeply entrenched anti-fat bias. You were born in this country, right? I don't want you to feel bad about that, because it was all downloaded into your consciousness without your consent before you could even talk. And now you have a choice, right? So yes, looking at pictures of fat bodies it's very, very powerful. With all of my new clients, I have them actively change their feed on their social media, and they have to look at like beautiful fat people. And it changes your brain, because it turns out that beauty is learned. Beauty is not, this idea that like, well, I'm just attracted to what I'm attracted to. That's nonsense. That's such nonsense. You are attracted to what you've been brainwashed to be attracted to. And so you can change that if you want to, and you can look at beautiful bodies of all different shapes and sizes. And it does help. It's actually really cool. You can like have it change.
I would love to promote any of those kind of sites. I would love to be part of my own personal reads, as well as what I recommend other people do.
There's so many incredible, it's exciting to be doing this work right now, because there's so many incredible fat activists in the world now. And on social media, like on Instagram, you can follow like all these hashtags that are, like fat is gorgeous, body neutrality, all of these things. And you can, start to actually have your little tribal brain let in more fatness. And then your little tribal brain is like, oh, they're in the family too. Yay. Yeah.
Yeah. Others, if you want to pipe in like this is how we're doing it this time. Please jump in. This is really fun, Paula.
Oh, good.
It's like a radio show, only you're the only one seeing. And the voices are coming in, and right now mine is the voice, but I know others have. It's very thought-provoking and exciting.
Yeah.
Imagine being led into the tribe, like you're saying.
Yeah.
It's living beautifully, just being alive beautifully.
Yes.
No apologies. Right.
Right. And when you think about it, the idea that only thin people are allowed to live that way is so bizarre, right? Like that's the thing. It's I'm an Aquarius, so I can get really into like these like spaces of like the idea that all bodies can and should be the same shape. How weird is that? It's so weird. Right? And that's what we're taught, right? Or that only people who live in thin bodies are allowed to live unapologetically, are allowed to go swimming, are allowed to feel good in clothes, right? That only people in thin bodies, that's bizarre, right? And so that's what we're moving towards.
So what ways do you, Suzanne, go ahead.
Do you have a question, Suzanne?
Well, more maybe I don't know if this is complicating the situation, but I think there are a lot of people who may not live in a fat body but still hate their body.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily like, oh, I mean, maybe the general idea, but sometimes the general idea doesn't help people either. So I was just thinking about that. And
No, that's a good point. I appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah,
So
because I'm thinking about myself. I mean, I don't live in a fat body, but it took me a long time, or in a big body or whatever. It's pretty average, and but it didn't mean that I was feeling all those things that you're mentioning.
yeah,
So, I think it is definitely like, yeah, this whole idea of what you were talking about, like self-acceptance and but it's even, it feels like it's even broader. It's for almost for everyone. I don't
it
know. I don't
is.
know a lot of people who really feel happy with their bodies. There's something about
Isn't
that.
that sad? That's so
Yeah,
sad.
or something that you don't like about it. It's usually not what you do like about it, but
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's just thinking about that.
No, I appreciate that. I have two things about that. So number one is the fact that like that's why body liberation is so exciting, is that it is for everybody, right? In the same way that like feminism is actually for men, right? Because men suffer from toxic masculinity, right? Or that like anti-racism is actually for white people, because to think that you're superior to other human beings based on the color of your skin is actually bad for all humans. And that's why body liberation, it is for, we're doing it for the thin people too, right? And right now I've lived in a fat body, and right now this is the shape my body is. I live in a straight sized body is the way we say it, because I can buy clothes at Target. But my body has been fat, right? But this is what this is for all beings, right? So that nobody has to hate their body. Nobody should hate their body. What a ridiculous thing to be doing. It's the only reason why we exist, and we hate it. It's so weird. The other thing about that, Susanna, and I really do appreciate you bringing this up, is another fat activist that I love talks about how like all people are, nobody's safe, right? Nobody's safe from this because it's capitalism, right? And the only way that people can get you to buy things is if you hate something about yourself. So nobody's safe from it. And people in all shaped bodies hate their bodies. And people who live in large bodies are actively oppressed, right? And so it doesn't mean that thin people or straight sized people don't suffer. They absolutely do, but it's all internal, right? And then for people who live in large bodies, it's internal and external. They're actually feeling the brunt of anti-fat bias and oppression. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, nobody's safe.
Nobody's safe. No, I that's a good point. Yeah. Because that's, I don't know. I mean, that's another question, but why is it that we all hate our bodies? What is that about?
Capitalism.
But that's a whole capitalism.
It's money. It's all money. It's all economics. Yeah. Right. If we all loved our bodies, if we all really loved our bodies, think how many industries would go out of business. So many.
So many.
Many. Yeah. Great.
Chris, you have a question? Chris, you got a question?
Oh, I thought you. I was just, as Paula was talking, I was having some. I was relating to it experientially. Past, you're talking about fat bias, fat body bias, and I was thinking about to a therapy, a training group I was in, and in fact, my colleague, one of the things she talked about was that she didn't trust me because I was a bigger person, and it turned out that her husband is a bigger person as well, and she has all this frustration, anger. It scares her. Big bodies actually scare her, as it turned out. And in the moment that this happened in a group of people, and I was, as you could imagine, embarrassed and upset. And to your point, thin people suffer from this too, because here she
Yes.
is thin, beautiful, and here she gets limited by knowing people and feeling safe with people because they're in big bodies, including her
Right.
husband,
Right. Yes.
because his body changed.
Yes. Oh, right. Right. Yeah. And this is, I love that. Right. And this is the Sonia Renee Taylor is this brilliant Black queer fat activist. I love her so much. She wrote the book, The Body is Not an Apology. And the way she describes it that I love is the hierarchy of bodies, right? So this woman is higher up than, the top, the pinnacle of the hierarchy of bodies is cis, white, male, young, muscular, etc. Right? And we all exist underneath that to some extent, right? With like a fat Black queer trans probably woman at the very, very bottom. And so like to participate in any of it participates in all of it, right? So I like what you're saying, that this woman, she was robbed of her relationship with you, which what a terrible thing to be robbed of, because of her belief or because of her existence in the hierarchy of bodies, her participation in the hierarchy of bodies. Yeah. It's fascinating.
Fascinating. And the thought is that when you're in a large body, right, there's again the bias. It stretches across so many things, as if fat people are untrustworthy, fat people are lazy,
Yes.
all this kind of just terrible stereotypes.
Yes. Right. Right. And so I can imagine, I don't know, I'm putting words in her mouth, but I imagine there's some sort of sense of betrayal, right? That he betrayed her because his body got bigger after they got married. Yeah. I mean, I count her lucky.
Say that.
Oh, just because my partner's fat and I like it.
Cuddly.
Yeah, it's so cuddly. Cozy is what my friends call it.
Oh, I'm curious about what you're saying to your young students of ways, just because sometimes it's just a matter of having phrases that can be repeated in terms of countering some of that internalized messaging.
Yes.
Any kind of mantras or things that you tell your students in this breakthrough stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, even the one you opened up with, I didn't get all of it and was wanting to, the one about all bodies are valuable in this moment, or all bodies are valuable in this
all
moment.
bodies are valuable as they exist in this moment. And the idea that you can make your body more valuable by shrinking it is weird and obviously an illusion. Like how can that be possible? How can my body suddenly be more valuable because it's smaller than it was before? That's not real. Yeah. Cindy. So one of the things I talk about with my students, that some of them get and some of them don't, is what I was talking about before, the hierarchy of bodies. To me, one of the most inspiring things, inspiring ways to participate in this is to know that when I participate in my own, in like hating my own body or like or whatever, then I am oppressing everyone who's under me, which is a lot of people because I am cis, I am white, I am straight sized. So that means when I hate my own body, when I participated in it all, everybody who's on the lower rungs, I am oppressing. So that helps me sometimes if my head gets caught up in old nonsense. And I'm in recovery from eating disorders and have done horrible things to my body in the pursuit of thinness. That was really dumb and painful and awful. So that helps me. Some of the other things I just say, because I get this question a lot, like how do you deal with people who are still actively in diet culture and in thin supremacy, and like what are some things you can say? I call them my little like loving truth bombs. So I say like, we don't talk about people's bodies. And like, that's it. You know, and you want to use it, you want to be as succinct as possible, like as few words as possible. So I say things like, oh, I don't believe in calories, or, you know, we don't talk about people's bodies. Or I even say sometimes, oh, I don't believe that smaller bodies are more valuable than larger bodies. And we say it like this in these big general ways. People tend to be like, oh, I guess I don't believe in that either, right? I don't believe that people in smaller bodies are more valuable than people in larger bodies. And it's very like, it's like a children's book, right? It's kind of Winnie the Pooh-y. Like if you say it in these like really like truth-loving truth bombs, then it sort of broadens people's, it brings it into the room without anybody having to defend anything, right? Because what you don't want to get into, or what I don't want to get into, is people like defending whatever, right? Because that's not fun, and I'm not trying to convince anybody.
No, I noticed that you're using I statements, you know,
Exactly.
one of the basic lessons that we always learn in communications. Like, I don't believe in the whatever thin people are more valuable. It's really like an I statement. So it's not like, oh, you shouldn't do this or that, but I really noticed that. Yeah. And I like the first one you were coming with too. It's like, if you do that, you implicitly do that to all the people, you know, that are
quote unquote under you.
Quote unquote. Yeah.
That was really powerful for me in reading Sonia Renee Taylor's book. I was like, oh yeah, you can't hate your own body and not participate in the belief that everybody who has a worse body than me, that's not real, but whatever, is less valuable than me.
I mean, it's really profound in grasping it and actually embodying that. And I keep coming up against what's happening in the medical profession, right? That's just a wall there. So even when I'm getting a little bit of your messages, you know, through to my clients, and they say, well, what happens when I talk to my doctor? Because then my doctor's going to go to that same, you know, spiel. So I'm just going to be like, here's quotes from Paula, you know, like, say this.
Well, there are a lot of things, right? Like there's a lot of actual facts out there. Like one of them being that, you know, study after study shows that if a person does not focus on weight or weight loss, but instead focuses on increasing behaviors that make them feel better in their body, sometimes their bodies get smaller. Oftentimes, specifically if they have a history of dieting, their bodies won't get smaller because a body gets bigger because it's been through the trauma of starvation. And so a body gets bigger every time you starve it. And if a body doesn't want to get smaller if it's lived through several bouts of starvation trauma. But the actual measures of health, of which weight and BMI are not, actually get better. So a person in any shape body can be quote unquote healthier when we're actually measuring things like heart rate, glucose levels, you know, cholesterol. Those things can get quote unquote, those things can get healthier and they tend to get healthier when a person does not focus on weight and weight loss at all. When a person doesn't focus on the shape of their body, they can increase their health. When a person focuses on the shape of their body, health always decreases. And there's more, what's so great about, thanks, Lindsay, exactly. There's more and more doctors who you can say, I don't want to be weighed. And they're using weight as a measure of health, again, of which it's not. It's a terrible measure of health because bodies just weigh different things for lots of different reasons. And statistically speaking, people of African descent just weigh more than people of European descent. So it's such a dumb measure of health and it's inherently racist. So don't get weighed. Don't know your weight. Your body's gravitational pull to the earth is not relevant. It's not relevant to anything. It's such a dumb measure of health. So don't get weighed. Refuse to get weighed.
I love it. I'm thinking of a particular argument that I've had of somebody in a larger body who's doing really healthy things and more quality of life things, but still holds this belief. Like
Yeah.
they're going to get attacked. And there's this part of me that has to validate them and say, yes, but you're not ugly. You're not less than. That is a delusion. That is something that our culture is, and you have to stand steady in the truth.
Which is that you are just as valuable as anybody else, and that the shape of your
Yes.
body is not relevant. Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, again, like it's all internalized, right? This belief system. And, you know, in those situations, what I find, and I run a group of a body liberation group for only people who live in large bodies. And we were actually talking about it this week, that like they have found, and it's been going for about 2 years now. And what they've found is like less statistics and actually more of them just living in pure fat joy is what actually changes people's minds. And I thought that was so beautiful and so incredible. And we know this from like trying to extricate ourselves from white supremacy, right? That like Black people living in joy is a revolutionary act, right? And it's the same as people in large bodies, that like what you can do, Cindy, in that moment is just radiate how perfectly beautiful this person is, right? And they may not be able to let it penetrate, but you can just keep doing that.
I agree. As I see it, I have a dance teacher, a West African dance teacher who's in a larger body and is an absolute joy to watch. And so I'm just mimicking and
Yes.
I'm just mirroring it and so joyful. And,
Right.
you know, not a skinny ballet dancer. I'm just moving. And
Yes.
we're laughing and it's wonderful. It's like being a kid again.
Right.
But only when I'm not thinking about other people are looking at me. Other people are
Right.
judging me. I'm only focused on my teacher.
Right.
Right.
Well, and that's
joyful face.
Yes. So that's one of my other mantras, which is my experience of living in this body is more important to me than your experience of looking at it.
Mm.
My experience of living in this body is more important to me than your experience of looking at it. I honestly don't give a fuck what your experience is looking at it. That's none of my business. It's none of my business. Wow. There's nothing more important to me than what my experience is, right? Mm-hmm. If people don't want to look at it, then look away. I don't care. But it's none of my business, right? And for us to shift the focus from like, what's everybody else's experience of looking at my body, which is such a bizarre thing to be focused on, and to bring it into my body and like, oh no, this is my one wild and precious life. I'm not interested in what other people are experiencing. I love it. It's hard, but it's liberating.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to join you to thank you
Yay.
for your just refreshing honesty. It's so moving. It's like I play you in my head, like, this is what Paula would say. And so then I feel empowered and then I share it with others. I want to thank you on this for being here. We're going to continue the conversation after I stop this. But some of the sites that you said, some of the resources that you talked about, I want to be able to make those available.
Oh, sure.
Particularly, I want people to be able to get into your groups. Like, how can they get into your groups?
So I'll give you my my website, and people can join my groups. Absolutely. I'm also I think in September starting a group that's going to meet either monthly or twice a month. That's specifically for professionals, so healers, therapists. I have a lot of people in the medical field that are interested in this, which is like,
that's great.
Makes my heart explode. So yeah, so that we can sort of do this on a regular basis. And I want to like Yeah, I just want like everyone to like soak it in and then go spread it in the world and then like soak it in so that we can change the world.
Yes, let's change the world. And anybody want to say one last thing before we close, or we'll have our own discussion? One last chance? Okay.